Hi, everybody. This is your co-host, Stu, and I'm here with the paranormalist, Patty Wilson. Patty, you're going to surprise me because we didn't talk about what you're going to talk about tonight.
Yes, people should know we almost never talk about what we're going to talk about.
And that's my preference. I don't
Yes.
I don't want to know until you start. That way I can be as extemporaneous as possible.
Awesome. So tonight I wanted to talk about roadside paranormal things, ghosts mostly, that come along the roadside. There's a ton of these stories, and they're as old as mankind. They really are. There are stories dating all the way back to the 1400s of in England and Europe of, young men finding a damsel in distress who begs them for a ride on, to the nearest village, hamlet, or town, and they, pull her up on the horseback with them, and as they're riding along, they're a little bit taken aback by the fact her grasp around their waist is a bit chill. And they get to the town or the place she's headed for. She most often is just simply gone. And at that point, they're horrified to realize that they had carried what they believe to be a dead woman. In some of the stories, it goes even further. They take her to the cemetery, which is the address she gave them, and the vicar there sees the young man and says that young girl died 60 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever. So those stories have happened forever. And usually it's always young girls. It's always the lady in white or the lady in red or something like that. But I came across one the other week that I thought was really interesting because it's not a lady in anything. So here's the story. It comes from Australia, and it's a contemporary story from a few years back, I believe around 2006. So what happened was he and his wife were coming home from a party. They were taking a rural route because it was less crowded, less traffic, and just a nicer drive. And as they're driving along this rural road, in his headlights, he catches a glimpse of a man running toward him through a field. And despite his wife saying, "Don't stop," he begins to apply the brakes, thinking there's got to be a reason this poor man is running through the field. He describes him as being about 50-ish in a pair of blue jeans and a blue shirt. Nothing major to stand out about him, but he's obviously quite frightened, and he comes rushing out onto the road, sees the car has pulled over now, and runs up to the car. Upon getting to the car, the man winds his window down a little bit, and this 50-year-old man is there huffing and saying, "Oh, thank God you stopped. I need some help. There were these two boys back there and in the other field, and they accosted me. They beat me while I was hunting mushrooms," which I don't know why one would hunt mushrooms in the middle of the night, but that's what the guy said. And so to his wife's absolute horror, he says, "Well, are you okay?" And he said the man did not look disheveled. He looked terrified, but he did not look disheveled at all. So the guy said, "Yes, but," and this man offered him his cell phone, and he said, "Here, you can use my phone to call some family. That way you'll be safe, and we'll just sit and wait with you." And he's like, "Look, I live by myself. There's nobody to call. And if I go home, I got to go back through that field. It's on the other side of that field. And I don't want to do that." The guy's like, "Well, I guess I could give you a ride." His wife is pulling on his, arm and letting her displeasure be known in whispers and glaring looks. So, much to his wife's consternation, he lets this man into the car. And he said he noticed the man was rather pale, and he thought it was odd because he was running. It was a warm night, and he should be perspiring and like flushed, but he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy tells him, he said, "There's two paths to my house. One is a dirt road that's right up the hill here, and you turn to the left, and it'll only be like a 5-minute drive, or you can take the 15-minute route along the highway." And of course, his wife's pulling on his jacket sleeve, letting her and him know she is not going down a dirt road with this creep. She's already decided there's something wrong with this dude. So he says, "Well, we'll take the highway." And by now, he said he's beginning to get a little bit apprehensive himself. Not for any reason. The man didn't do anything. He was just beginning to get apprehensive. So he takes him down the road, and he said, he thought, there's a lot of like people that are single that live in these little shacks and huts out in the countryside. And he thought, well, he's probably one of those, and I'm going to pull up on this little old shack, and I'll let him out, and then we'll just get going. So he does. He's absolutely right. He pulls up to this what looks like an old shack, and the guy gets out of the car. He thanks them, and he heads toward the door. And as he's walking to the door, the guy's watching him, and that's whenever the guy's wife like loses it, and she goes, "What the heck do you think you're doing?" Blah blah. And she's yelling at him. So he turns to look at her for a second, looks back. He doesn't see the guy. He didn't hear the door shut. Nothing seems to have moved. And he said, he knew that this was a crazy idea, but he felt compelled. So he said to her, "Just slide it over here in the driver's seat. I'm going to make sure he got in the house okay." He was pretty rattled. And he gets out of the car and he walks up to the little shack, opens the door. It's completely empty, cobwebs everywhere. It is obvious this place has not been lived in many a year. At that point, goose flesh, all over, and he takes off running back for the car, and he and his wife speed out of there. Is it a ghost story? Very much could be a ghost story, but it's a fascinating story nonetheless. And a kind of a twist, you never hear story about men appearing out of nowhere to beg a ride, but this guy apparently did. And it's not the only story, of course, of that, but most of the time it's a woman or a child. West Virginia has a great story, and in Martinsburg, West Virginia, there's a building called King's Daughters Court. Now, the story of the building is that during the mid 1800s, it was purchased by some nuns. It was an old hotel type situation, and they wanted to be a nursing order, and so they tried to set up a hospital in King's Daughters Court, but it was an issue of the times and of the fact they were women and nuns. None of the men would come there. Few of the women would come there. But, eventually there's a story that goes with this that there was a young woman who was very ill, who was taken off of a train, and the doctor sent her to the nuns to take care of her, thinking that, this is kind of like good publicity. It'll help them to get people to trust them. And that was the start of a nursing order that would last up until the 1990s. And so they were teaching in nursing hospital for a long time, about 100 years or a little more. In fact, there are women alive today who were nuns who taught and were nurses in that place that have retired and what have you, but they worked there actively. So moving on to the part of the story I was really interested in for tonight. So in the 1930s, there was a young woman who worked there. She was a widow, and she basically did like CNA work and cleaning, stuff like that. They didn't call it that, but that's basically what it was. She had one daughter who was about 7 or 8 years old, and she would leave the daughter with a relative when she would go to work, and she worked second into third shift, depending on how long the nurses needed her. And obviously this was a job that she absolutely needed to have. She was alone in the world with her child. Well, something happened one night, and the little girl ran away from the relative and started walking down the road toward King's Daughters Court. Along the way, somebody pulled over and stopped her and talked to her and asked her, where was she going this late at night by herself? And she answered, and they said, "Well, we'll take you to the hospital. Get in the car." And she did, and they did. Nothing horrible happened. They drop her off at the door, and one of the nuns answers the door, realizes that it's the employee's daughter, and brings her in. After that, she does this a few times. She runs away and tries to find a ride. One night she did exactly what she had done before, ran away and started trying to find a ride to take her to her mom. And this night she didn't make it there. In fact, she was never seen again. Up through the 1990s, it is said that late at night you'll see an old car coming along, dropping the little girl off, and she'll come up to the door and knock on the door and disappear. Other people have seen her walking along the road and offered to give her a ride, fearing that she would get hurt, and have taken her to King's Daughters Court, where she has disappeared out of the back seat of their car.
As many of the stories, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I will tell you, I've had the luxury of not only driving past King's Daughters Court, but being able to tour it, go through it before it was remodeled. It's now got a different purpose. And Eve, the very first time I drove past it was with a girlfriend of mine, and we were like, I had no information about it, and that's actually what caused me to get interested in that old building. At the time, it was empty, and she's driving along telling me stories about another building down the street that's supposed to be haunted. And as we hit that building, I literally started to like get goose flesh. It was like, oh, there's something going on. And I said to her, pull over. And she's like, why? And I said, this building's haunted. I know it's haunted. And there are other stories, obviously, because it was a hospital. And she looked at me funny and she's like, did you ever hear the stories of King's Daughters Court? And I'm like, oh, what is that? I had no idea about any of it. And that's how I first learned about it and started doing research on it. I actually wrote about it in Haunted West Virginia. In fact, it's the picture of on the front of the cover of that is of the little girl being picked up by a car. And it's one of my favorite stories. And it's not because it's a great story. There's just something about that building that got under my skin.
Now you're going to make me go pull the book off my shelf and look at the cover.
So it's a picture of a little girl. It's at night, and a little girl standing there in a little white pinafore, and a car pulling up. There's so many such stories. There's amazing pieces of highway that have such rich history. There's a place called Blood Point Road in Illinois. Now, it's named after Arthur Blood. It's not that it's just gory.
Oh, okay. Nothing to do with the liquid, but okay.
Yes, because I was like, oh, that's an interesting name, and then I was reading down through. So he was one of the many deaths there. So the stories of this road are very dark. It's a lonely piece of highway. There's stories of witchcraft. There's stories of fatal crashes along this road, phantom vehicles that dash out from little side lanes and cause people to have accidents. There's a place called Blood Point Bridge. It's an old railroad bridge, and it is probably the most haunted section of this highway. Multiple people have flung themselves off of this overpass over the years. The body count runs somewhere between 4 to 8 people, one of them being Arthur Blood. And he killed himself there in the late 1800s. This place has so much activity. Another thing that I found interesting about this story is that people, before they have an encounter, will report something that you don't often hear with a ghost story, but you often hear with a UFO story. They'll say that there's electronical malfunctions. The equipment in the car stops working. The lights won't come on. The radio starts, fuzzing out or scanning channels. And then they'll see something, a figure walking along or a car that pulls out of nowhere, something like that. And when it passes by them, then everything becomes normal again.
Interesting.
It is interesting. So like I said, it's not one of those things you often hear with a ghost story. But whatever's going on there, it has an electronic component, if you will.
I've never encountered anything like that myself. But
no, I never have either. I mean, I've heard stories of places that happens, but usually it's with UFO stuff.
Right.
Once in a blue moon, you'll hear a story where the TV went crazy or turned itself on or something like that. But that's still a fairly rare occurrence. So another one that is interesting is a place called Kelly Road in Pennsylvania. It's a little stretch of road kind of connecting two main roads together. It's not well known. It's not well traveled. And here's the interesting thing about this road. It is haunted by white figures. They're not female. They're not male. Nobody can tell you what they are. Just white figures. They're seen along that piece of road, and they're moving along the highway. When you get up to them, they're just gone. But here's the thing that makes this story unique. People who have a pet in their car, mostly a dog, the dog can be completely docile, never had any problems with anger or aggression. And when they get on that piece of road, it becomes extremely alert, and starts growling and barking, and sometimes even attacking its owner. It's very agitated on this piece of road. And then the white figures appear and the dog goes crazy. And once you get off that road, it's only a mile long, so it doesn't take long, onto a larger road, the dogs will immediately calm down and everything will be okay.
Well, not many people travel with their cats, so I guess dogs are going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I actually know people who do, but not many.
Mhm.
You know, that's probably, cats aren't known for wanting to do cart rides.
No, they usually associate that with bad times.
Yes, hissing, howling, yodeling, screaming.
They know that they're going to go to the vet. You know, they know that, and that's not a happy time.
Yeah. My cat, my old one, we don't put him in a cage anymore because it causes panic attacks. And he's 19. I'm afraid he'll have a heart attack. So like my youngest son will hold him in the car if he has to go somewhere. And he's less anxious, but he still is not happy about the process. But I've noticed whenever we put him in a cage, he gets insane,
Hmm.
just panics like crazy. So we don't do that anymore. But there is another road I'd like to talk a little bit about. It is called Lawler Ford Road. It's in Missouri. Now, most people won't know it as Lawler Ford Road. What they might have heard of it as Zombie Road. It is actually a really interesting piece of highway. So along this road there runs a river, and this river in particular has a great many sightings of dark figures, things like that. And a lot of them coming out of the river or going into the river. And as you go down, there's a railroad bridge, and you can't drive across it anymore. And so you walk across it. A lot of stories of figures being seen on it. But the most interesting thing is there have been some paranormal researchers, some very good ones, the Booth brothers and a team that works with them. The Booth brothers are probably very famous in the paranormal community. They do some amazing work. And during one of these projects that they were working on, they actually went to Zombie Road to work on it. They did an entire documentary, or a huge component of the documentary was Zombie Road. And there is this photograph where one of the paranormal researchers working with them was shooting, like you're down on the road and there's hills all around you, and he's shooting up onto the hills, and you can see the figures of children standing there, silhouettes as clear as day, in front of the trees and beside the trees, and there's like a dozen or more. It's a fascinating photograph, and it has been caught several times. And the story is that there was a reformatory or an orphanage, depending on who tells you the story, in that area, and that these children are lost. But people have seen figures for a long time along Zombie Road, and there's been multiple murders. The river was a place where they used to dump the bodies for the mafia. There's just a lot of darkness in this area, and it's a fascinating piece of road. But like I said, it has a very dark history.
Sounds like it.
Have you ever get a chance to look that photograph up? It's part of their documentary. I think they even used it on the box and the trailer for the documentary. So it would be worth looking up.
Okay.
A fascinating, fascinating road. So I wanted to talk about a couple more stories, and then I'm going to let folks go tonight. One of them is a story that I have loved, excuse me, ever since I was about 10 years old. So one of my very first paranormal books was written by a lady named Margaret Ronan, and it was one of the Weekly Reader Book Club books. I've talked about it a couple times.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I still have it, which is no mean feat since I'm getting to be an old chick and I've moved a few times.
Well, you said you were 10 years old, so that was what, 19 years ago, right?
Oh, God bless you, man. God bless you. Now I'm 58. Now I'm not ashamed of it. I've got 58 years worth of life that I've experienced. But anyway, there was a story in there about a remote area at the turn of the 20th century where this young man was basically going out to kind of like experience life and make his fortune type deal. So he's riding along on his horse and he's looking for a farm to work at or a ranch to work at, something like that in the Northwest. And he comes across this little ruined, abandoned log cabin along this little dirt road he's riding along. In 1900, there were a lot of dirt roads yet.
Mm.
It wasn't until the 1940s that we began to pave most of our highways. So he rides along this, and he's doesn't really pay much attention to the cabin. And suddenly out of the cabin comes this little tiny fox terrier, and it jumps up on his bedroll. His horse kind of spooks, and he tries to push the dog down, thinking, it's scaring the horse. But his hand goes through it, just sitting there, big as life, riding on the bedroll. But it's not really there at all. And he rides a little ways down the road, kind of spooked. I mean, what else are you going to do? You can't just stop. And a dog just appears, just gone. So a couple miles further down, he finds a ranch where the guy needs some work, and some workers, and he gets a job working for this fella. And every so often, he'd have to ride past this log cabin to go back into town. And after he got used to the idea that there was a little phantom dog that came out of the cabin, he didn't say much about it until months later. He would have this experience on multiple occasions first. And one night he was talking to the farmer, and I guess he felt he knew him well enough now to not get fired for being crazy. And so he said, "Hey, you know that old busted down log cabin back the road a few miles?" And he's like, "Yep, I know that cabin well." He's like, "That sounds crazy." But he said, the farmer said, or the rancher said, there's a little like fox terrier or something, comes running out of the cabin, jumps up on your bedroll and rides along with you, but he's not real. And you put your hand through him when you try to push him off. And the guy's like, "You've had that experience too?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, a lot of us have." He's like, "In fact, I knew the guy that owned the dog." So basically the story was that this old man came to the area, took up residence in that cabin about 30 years earlier when this rancher was a young fella, and kind of eked out a living raising a garden and doing some chores for other people to make whatever money he needed to for supplies. And he had with him this little fox terrier, and he absolutely doted on this little dog. The old man finally got sick, and this rancher and his wife and a couple other couples would take turns going over to make sure he had food, medicine, his needs were being met, and to feed the little dog. After a few weeks of taking care of the old man died. So they took his body out back and they buried him behind his little cabin. And the rancher said, "I tried to bring the little dog with me over to my house. I thought for sure, I could give him a decent life and what have you. But every morning he'd be gone and I'd find him laying on the old man's grave." Well, another fella tried to take him too, and there was no doing it. The dog wouldn't eat. He grieved. He grieved himself to death. And he said, but the old man used to always let him ride on his bedroll when he was healthy and happy. And he said, so I think that he comes out of that cabin from time to time, looking for the old man still, riding along on a bedroll till he realizes he's not going to get to find the old man, and then he goes back. And I've always loved that story, about such love and faith and devotion that little dog must have had. Quite a tale, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, I'm just sitting here just taking it all in.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of cool stories, but that one I've always liked since I was a small child. And there's a few other stories. There's a Route 6 in West Virginia. Excuse me, I apologize, right on the Route 9, is a really interesting piece of highway because there's so many ghost stories on this road. So during the American Civil War, some of these little towns up and down Route 9 were taken back and forth between the Union and the Confederates 20, 30 times. So there's a lot of fighting along this highway, a lot of wounded soldiers that were left to die because the unit had to keep moving light and couldn't do any good for them. So they park them along the side of the road and hope that somebody would come along and help them. But of course, most of the time it didn't happen. But there are so many stories. There's a couple stories in particular that I found fascinating. For years and years, at least since the early 1920s is the first time I could document a sighting of this. There was a Confederate soldier in gray riding a white or a light gray horse, and he comes riding up out of nowhere, coming dashing toward the car, eventually stops just before hitting the car. Of course, the motorist is terrified. He's slamming on the brakes, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to hit this guy. And as he sits there in his car trying to, calm down, the guy is just standing there, up in the stirrups on his horse. Sometimes he dismounts. Sometimes he walks right up to the car and puts his hand on the hood. Other times he whirls around and rides through the car. But I can't imagine it's a very comfortable feeling for those who have that experience.
Well, maybe not. I mean, there are some of us, probably you and I included, we would relish an opportunity like that. Yeah.
But I still think, though, it makes you scared. I mean, I've had moments when I have been afraid. Up in Cambria County a few years ago, a good friend of mine, her name's also Patty, she and I were driving along, and we were talking, and she was telling me a couple ghost stories from the area. And there's this really sharp turn on this little road that she had us on. And as we hit that turn, I saw a young man, on a bicycle come whirling out of nowhere and speed across the road. And this guy scared the bejeebers out of me. I yelped because I thought we were going to hit him. And I yelled, oh my God, Patty, watch out. And she saw nothing. And so she pulls off up the road and she's like, what did you see? And I'm like, did you not see that young man on the bicycle? He came out of nowhere. And she's like, oh, that. So she takes me about 3 more miles up the road to this little tiny constable's office. And she pulls in, and she knows everybody up that way because she's lived up there just shy of forever. And the constable was still at the office at that point in the day. And she said to him, you know that little curve down there? And he's like, yeah. She's like, Patty, tell him what you saw. So I told him the story of the boy on the bike. And he looked at me and he said, looked at Patty and he said, did you tell her that? And I'm like, look, nobody told me anything, but I really would like it if somebody would. And he said, well, in 1968, I was just getting started as a police officer in this area. And there was a boy he was like 20, 23 years old, somewhere in that range. And he was riding his bike, and he was known for riding it like the devil was after him. He would just ride and not pay attention to everything around him. And I guess he thought people would stop for him. And one day on that curve, somebody encountered him, but because it was on the curve, they didn't have time to stop. And they hit him. And he told me, he said, that was one of my very first fatalities. And I've never forgotten that boy. And since then, he had seen that boy riding along multiple times. Other people have seen him riding along multiple times. And eventually, I saw him riding along. And he was so physically real, I yelled because I was convinced we were going to hit that kid. Like, the word paranormal never entered my mind. I was literally shocked that this kid came out of nowhere around that turn.
And daylight, right?
Total daylight sighting. It was probably middle of the summer, 3:30 in the afternoon. No other traffic on the road. Like I said, it's a little back road in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But I completely was convinced that was a real person until Patty pulled up and had the constable talk to me. It's just an interesting story. And apparently he's still being seen to this day.
Oh, so when we're done, you're going to tell me what road that is, because I'm going to go.
I will call Patty and get the exact name of that road because it was really interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
I was one of the those experiences that just wasn't. It didn't even strike the word paranormal. It was just, oh, I thought we were going to kill that kid. And then she looked at me funny and she's like, what kid? And I told her what I saw, and then she smiled and she said, just hold on a minute. I'll explain it all to you in a few minutes. And that's how we got to that constable.
Yeah, and I suppose being a sharp turn, there's no place to pull off and just camp out there for a little bit.
No, you could maybe like walk back. If you parked up the road, walk back and be off the road safely. Because there's woods, you could stand right there. But it was just, or maybe even put a game camera out would be cool. They're motion activated and infrared.
Hey, you're going to get a lot of cars.
You are going to get a lot of cars, but what if you get the boy one of these times?
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, just thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, just, I mean, you could get a deer, a lot of deer. God only knows what other animals. But this road is well known in the area for the boy still being sighted.
That's a cool story.
It is a cool story.
Especially since you saw the boy and Patty didn't. So
Yeah, that was interesting. I don't understand how she missed it because, and I
Mm.
told her that, because he was like right in front of her. So I'm going to end tonight with one more story. This one's a family story of mine. And this story took place when I was a little baby. So we're looking 64. We've been about the time range. So coming off Route 22, headed toward Williamsburg, there's an area called Fay Mansions. And
Okay.
there's some beautiful old mansions that sit up on the hill there. One night, my brother Terry was coming home from work. It was middle of the night. And he was working at Berwyn White at the time as a welder. So he got off like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And he came up that piece of highway, and sitting in the middle of the road was an old woman. He said she had like gray hair. She was sitting cross-legged in the middle of one of the two lanes, the lane going down into town. And she looked like she was just wearing tons of different rags. The clothes were just all gray and ratty looking. And he stopped the car. It was raining slightly, and he stopped the car in time, and she stood up. She looked at him, walked over to the edge of the road near the river. The little branch of the Juniata runs along that area. And she took 3 or 4 steps down and disappeared. He was so rattled. He gets home, he wakes up our dad and our brothers, and he tells them the story. And my dad is convinced he hit this old woman, and he made up this other story, maybe not even willingly, but to explain away what he saw. So my dad rounds everybody out of bed, all the boys, and he says, "Oh my God, you hit somebody. You must have hit her if she was sitting in the middle of the road." And he makes the boys go back with him, and they walk every inch of this piece of road. They walk it on both sides. They look for the footprints where the person walked down through the mud. There's nothing, literally nothing. So my oldest brother is one of those people that likes to make fun of other people, and he takes sport at other people's expense sometimes. So he's laughing at my youngest brother, and telling him, "Oh, you hallucinated the whole doggone thing, blah, blah, blah. You're being stupid." And we're going back to bed. So over the course of the next few weeks, he's hassling our youngest brother pretty bad about seeing spooks and specters and imagining things and what have you. He's just really giving him a rough time. And then one night that my older brother was coming home, and he had exactly the same experience. Sitting on the road was this little pudgy lady, long, shaggy. She looked like the witch out of an old Scooby-Doo movie. The hair, the indistinguishable clothing, and she's sitting there. He pulls his car to a stop. He gets out, and he's just standing there looking at her, looking at him. And she stands up, walks to the edge of the road, walks 3 steps down towards the river, and fades away. At that point, he's panicked, goes home, wakes everybody up, just like my other brother did, tells them what he saw, and once more, my dad makes everybody go out to look for the woman, just in case something else had happened. We can't leave somebody laying out there sick, hurt or something, right? Gotta go.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So they do. There's absolutely nothing. Fast forward about, 15, 18 years later, there were 2 hunters up on that mountain above the Fay Mansions, and a really bad rainstorm popped up, and they happened to find an old cave up there. There's several old caves up in that mountain range, And they take shelter in this old cave. And they find the skeletal remains of an old woman, the long, shaggy gray hair, and just the rotting remnants of clothing. Well, of course, they went out much faster than they went in, got a hold of the authorities, took them up there, and showed them what was what. And that's when this story came out. In the early 1960s, there was an old woman who was taking care of her 2 grandchildren. She probably started in the late 50s because they were really little when she first took them. The state was going to take them and put them in foster care. And she kidnapped them and took them up to that mountain where she had lived most of her life, and she knew the mountain like the back of her hand. She hid them in that same cave, and she would go out like to get supplies, and she told them, never go outside the cave when I'm not here. And they lived up there for several years. This is a true story. And when they got a little older, they went wandering out one time when she was gone for a day or so, and got caught by some hikers or something, and they ended up in foster care. And if some local history, where the Williamsburg Church of God is at used to be the Blair County Children's Home. So they took these boys over there. She showed up at the children's home on a couple occasions and was seen sneaking into the building, and they, of course, made her leave, escorted her out, trying to steal her grandsons back. So apparently she lived up there till she passed away. Was she alive when she showed up in front of my brothers? Was she dead at that point in time? She'd been up in that mountain, laying in that cave for a good many years.
There's why sitting in the middle of the road. That's again, unless for shock value.
Yeah. I don't know, but I know she was seen those 2 times. I know she was seen in the children's home on 3 separate occasions, and it is estimated she had passed away easily before the children's home, and possibly before my brothers saw her. I mean, she was like their grandmother or great grandmother, so she was old at the time. Mm-hmm. She was determined to take care of her own family, not let the government take them away. She did what she thought was right. But my brothers, that happened when I was a year old. So I'm 58. So 57 years ago is when the whole thing started. And in all of their lives, they have never backed down from that story.
You have a lot of family stories.
I do. Actually, the very first book started out as family stories, and I sent it to the 2 publishers. The second publisher wanted to publish it, but she wanted more around the state stories. So then I began to put other stories into it. But when my sister's oldest boy graduated high school, I sent him a copy of the first book, the book with all the family stories. And in the margins, I wrote, this story came from your grandmother Richardson. This one came from. So I told him the backstory on the story, so he would know these are his family stories. But yeah, my family's had, on both sides, have had a good many paranormal experiences. So, I think some families are more prone to it than others. Most of them on my mother's side. There's only 2 stories on my dad's side, the one I just told, and then the one his mother used to tell. So only those. But no, on my grandmother Richardson's side, my mother's mother, there were a half dozen or more. She had paranormal experiences throughout her entire life, and so did my mother. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a hereditary factor. I think
undoubtedly, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that there's just families where it happens more. They're more attuned to it or whatever. That was my last story for tonight, sharing some old and some newer ones.
Well, that interesting. I really enjoyed this topic, and hopefully our viewers and listeners also enjoyed the topic. And if so, please do us the favor of clicking the like button down below if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you link to it from Facebook or wherever you get it from. That lets YouTube know that you enjoyed the video, and you'll perhaps be shown more of them. If you click the like button and hit the subscribe button, I'm sorry, not the like. If you click the bell, you'll get notified when we release some new content. And You can check us out on our Facebook page as well, the Paranormalist Podcast. Email paranormalist@theparanormalistpodcast.com. And we do appreciate, I mean, we've been over, I think when I last looked at it today, it was like 538 in the Paranormalist Podcast Facebook group, which is fantastic. We thank you all. Tell your friends. We can only get bigger.
Yep.
Hopefully.
We're growing. We're growing, and hopefully if you have a topic you want to hear about, let me know. I'm looking at a few things, military, paranormal stories, ghost stories, things like that. Some other subjects that I want to talk a little bit more, chupacabra, some gargoyle stories, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff coming up, but if you have a topic or something you want to share, please reach out and let us know.
Okay. And with that, I will say good evening. Unless you have something to add, of course.
Oh, no. Good evening to you too, Stu.
All right, Patty. Good night then.
Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.